With the advent of the railgun in the early 21st century, human artillery gained even more range and destructive potential. A tungsten rod, accelerated to 3 kilometers per second, could travel incredible distances and, depending on the weight of the projectile, had incredible destructive power in the form of kinetic energy. These new artillery pieces had been used to great effect in the resource wars of the mid and late 21st century and were naturally adapted for ship-to-ship combat once we developed FTL. Their range and destructive power allowed human ships to meet most alien races on even terms. They enjoyed widespread success on board spacecraft. What changed everything was when we developed the Sagittarius program. An enterprising young engineer thought back to the days of the Cold War and how the contemporary United States and Soviet Union had deployed SSBNs around the world for nuclear deterrence. These vessels were designed to hide and silently sail through the deep awaiting orders that all sane people hoped would never be issued. They were a form of deterrence, and they were damn good at what they did, seeing as we're still here today. This engineer realized that the same concept could be applied to spacecraft. Human ships had previously ignored the concept of stealth, but if we designed a ship to hide from the onset of production, we could probably make it invisible, at least until it fired. As it turns out, there are almost no limits to human ingenuity, and the Sagittarius class of SSBNs was a resounding success. Silent, dark, almost no energy signature, 0 active sensors, and a power plant that allowed them to stay underway almost indefinitely. They formed the backbone of humanity's forward deterrence. Each was armed with 24 reloadable tubes capable of launching conventional nuclear missiles, small anti-ship tungsten rods, or munitions of the highly classified Sagitta program. Rumored to be the space-borne equivalent of the ICBMs of old Earth, these weapons have never been used in anger. As soon as we had a decent number of these boats, they began their long silent patrols through the inky black of space. Excitement on an SSBN means something bad has happened, the world is ending, or you've been detected. A quiet cruise is a happy cruise. As far as we can tell, our SSBNs have never been detected. Space is simply too large, and they're too good at hiding for it to be worth looking for them. All the same, the captains conducted their drills at an almost constant war footing, doing their jobs, but hoping and praying that they would never need to turn their keys. You see, they knew the details of the Sagitta program, even if their crews did not. There was of course speculation, but the only tests of the program were so clandestine that only a handful of people knew what it was truly capable of. When the Rhodesians attacked one of our space stations on the frontier, we offered peace and accommodation. We expected them to accept and nobody else would be hurt. What we didn't expect was an all-out invasion and the conquest of several smaller worlds. Our military responded, and we beat them back over the course of several months, but what we found on the worlds they had occupied hardened our resolve. The Rhodesians had razed our worlds, nothing of our colonies and cities remained. Beautiful, temperate worlds had been transformed into cracked and stinking landscapes filled with active volcanoes that blocked out the sun. No trace of our people was left behind. Still, our leaders were willing to offer peace. We had taken our territory back and more or less fought the Rhodesians to a standstill. We were willing to forgive. They attacked us again and drove towards one of our more established worlds. That's when we decided that enough was enough. We offered them one last chance to comply with our demands for peace. When they refused, we issued the orders. The Sagittarius vessels had been lying in wait near each of the Rhodesian planets. When the crisis began, we started pushing them into forward deployed zones, praying that they would be unnecessary. Aboard the silent-running Sagittarius SSBNs, messages were received and then authenticated in a procedure as old as submarines themselves. Strike packages were loaded into missiles, and launch codes were taken in hand. Aboard each of the 18 vessels, 2 keys were turned, and 2 men asked God for forgiveness. When those keys were turned, 216 launch tubes opened, and 216 Sagitta munitions were accelerated and sent towards their targets. The war was over roughly 12 minutes after the first impact. You see, the Sagitta program took the concept of railgun weaponry and adapted it to a planetary scale. Each munition was a guided, stealthed, nearly undetectable mass of black tungsten. Created as a last resort weapon, they were designed for planetary bombardment. Each one has an impact area roughly equivalent to the size of old Alaska on Earth and also generates seismic activity through sheer force of impact. The Rhodesians were warned. None of their worlds has anything close to the previous level of life on it. There are still isolated pockets, but as it turns out, 216 weapons designed to create tidal waves, earthquakes, and a shockwave the size of Alaska are pretty devastating. After firing, the SSBN slept away into the cold. Not a single one was lost. The rest of the galaxy caught on pretty quickly to our new capability and got word to us that they wanted nothing but peace and friendship with humanity. Even so, the Sagittarius vessels still go on patrol and still keep their silent watches in the darkness of interstellar space. They stand ready to unleash Armageddon upon our enemies. While this may seem like a terrible job to do, Sagittarius captains prefer not to think of it that way. Instead of the destroyers, these vessels are our guardian angels. They are the sharpened edge of the shield that safeguards our people. Author's name and link to original text is in the description.